This is the second video in the series of 3D objects in Adobe Photoshop created for Mr. Grant's class, AET 4813, Advanced Digital Media at Eastern Illinois University. This video will cover the basics for 3D extrusion using a type layer. Once you have Photoshop opened up, the first thing you'll want to do is ensure that you are in the 3D workspace, which is over here. 3D is selected. You will then want to create a new document. This can be done by going to File, New. In the dialog box that opens up, you will want to name your document and change the preset to Web. And the preset's already set at Web, and then click OK. The white artboard should then open up for you to begin to work on. The next step would be for you to click the Type tool, which is right here, and then start typing. For the purpose of this video, I will use my name for the text. Once you have your text typed in, you will want to increase the size of your text that you'll be working with. This can be done by highlighting the text and then changing the text size. Mine's at 140, so I might make it about 150. Or actually, maybe about 175. Okay, you will then want to verify that in the Layers panel that the text layer is visible, which is here. It makes it visible. To create the 3D extrusion, you will go to the top menu and click on 3D, and then 3D extrusion from selected layer. Once you have converted the text into 3D, you will now have the 3D properties panel to manipulate the 3D text. First, we'll go into my view and change it a little so I can see that it is a 3D object. I will select my text again, and then the properties panel is up here. There are 4 different subpanels in the properties panel. You zoom in on this. There is the mesh, which is currently selected, the deform, the cap, and the coordinates. The first section of the properties panel is the mesh section. Let me just scroll in on that for a second. The mesh properties panel is where basic extrusions are created. In the mesh section of the properties panel is where you can manipulate the shadows, change the shape of the object via the presets in the application here, manipulate the depth of the extrusion of the 3D text object, and you can also change the color of the 3D object. Again, this is where you will go to manipulate the basics of the extrusion. Let me zoom back out and show you a few of those things. So for the shape presets, there is a relatively large list here of different types of shapes that you can change it to. For instance, that is the shear object, the deflate, and I will change it back to extrude, which is what it defaults to. Changing the extrusion depth, if you increase the depth, it increases the depth of the extrusion towards the back of the object. Decreasing the extrusion depth increases the depth of the object forward of the object. So set it about there so we can see the changes that we're making. To change the color of the text, you click on Text, and you can choose your new color. Do a little brighter blue, click OK. The next section of the properties panel is the deform section. You zoom in on the properties panel here. The deform section is activated by clicking here. The Deform Properties panel is where you take the 3D object and deform it. You can also change shape presets in the extrusion depth in the Deform section as well. Unique to the Deform panel is the twist and taper properties. Let me zoom back out. First, let me show you where your shape presets and extrusion depth are, just like in the mesh section. Unique, like I said, unique to the Deform section is twist and taper, which I'll show you here in a moment. So to twist, click on this and it twists it around. Let me zoom out a little. Let's see. So you can kind of see this a little bit better. Increasing the twist and then decreasing the twist. Set it back to 0 here. Moves kind of fast. So if you wanted to decrease it, it moves it that way. Increase it, moves it the other way. So we'll slightly twist it there. That's about an 18-degree twist. Set it back to 0 so we can see the other effects on their own. If you wanted to taper, it's defaulted at 100%. And that's increasing the taper. Decreasing the taper to 0 makes it look like that. So let's change it back to 100%. Type in these also. Also, there's a little, can manipulate it. Let's see. Back on the Deform panel. Can manipulate it by moving the object on the screen as well. Now for the third section of the Properties panel, the Cap section. Again, I'll zoom in on that. You can see the options here. The Cap Properties panel is where the faces of the object or the start and end points of the extrusion are manipulated. You can choose if you want to manipulate the front, the back, or the front and the back of the faces of the object. The options to change the faces are beveling, inflating. You can also adjust the strength. I'm going to zoom back out and show you how those work. So if I just wanted to change the front, I would choose front. Just the back, I would choose back. For this instance, I'm going to choose the front and the back. So to bevel, there's a slider here. You can increase the bevel. If you can see over here, as I move this slider, it gets more of a bevel. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit more on the object. It'll be easier to see. We'll set to 0. And then if I increase the bevel, you can see that the beveling increases. I'm going to set that back to 0. That's the width of the bevel. And for the angle of the bevel, I can also change that. Again, the same things that are over here are also over here to be manipulated, whichever is easier for the user. You can change the contour as well. I don't know if you can see that with this text object or not. I'll just set it back to the standard. I can change the inflation angle. You can see anything that's happening there or not. It's kind of hard with the text. And then the strength. So that's a really strong change there. Put it about there. And I can also reset the deformation, which I'm not sure I want to do that right now. So, but that pretty much covers the options under the Cap section of the Properties panel. The last section of the Properties panel is the Coordinates Properties panel. This is where you can manipulate the position in the space of the 3D object. And it is this little section here. Again, I will zoom in so we can see that a little closer. You have the option to change the units from inches to centimeters to millimeters to pixels. I'll keep it at inches for this instance. There are 3 different sections under the coordinates section of the properties panel. There is the position section, the rotation section, and the scale section. These coordinates change the position of the 3D object on the X, Y, and Z planes. You can also reset the coordinates to 0 in this panel. The coordinates can be reset for each individual section or all 3 sections at once. So each individual section, all 3 sections at once. The last thing in the coordinates section of the properties panel is the moving to ground. Let me show you what that looks like. Zoom back out. So if I were on my object and I had moved it up, or just twisted it, let's just twist it there, move it up a little bit. Then I'm going to zoom out. And then if I clicked on move to ground, see the object had moved to ground. Again, let me increase it. So you can see this a little bit better. Move to ground. Moves to ground. This concludes my video on the basics for 3D extrusion using a type layer. Thank you for watching.